Bill Villa joins me in studio. Bill has been an advocate for people that have had someone in their family has been a victim of a drunk driver, and he's not happy with how the Lehigh County court system handles DUI offenders, and he
DUI homicide.
DUI homicide offenders, and he's got a lot to go over today. He just wanted to kind of get the record set straight on a lot of different things. So, first of all, what's the latest? You said, can I be on? And when we schedule this, is there any reason why now? I mean, is it just a lot going on in the court with them?
Yeah, there are some important DUI homicide cases going through the court. We've been talking about this Amber Washko case. Amber killed Joe Hennessy driving drunk, and there's some real head scratchers going on with that case. The biggest one, of course, being why the black box data from Amber Washko's car wasn't collected by the Allentown Police or the Lehigh County District Attorney's Office.
Yeah, here's the thing.
I mean, they got the decedent Joe Hennessy's black box data, which indicated he had gone from a complete stop to 15 miles an hour before he was T-boned. Certainly looks like he was stopped at a red light. Had they gotten that black box data from Amber Washko's car, they might not still be able to prove who ran the red light because they are, they're kind of up in the air with that one. But they certainly could have established how fast she was going. And if she was speeding, then there would have been grounds to charge her with vehicular homicide.
Now they're saying that she wasn't going that fast based on the evidence they have. But I have to tell you, Bill showed. I'm not an expert. Obviously, I'm not. But boy, when I look at that car,
it looks like it was hit at more than 42, 43 miles an hour, doesn't it?
It sure looks it to me. Maybe let me put it to you this way. If that's the damage from 45 miles an hour...
42 or
43 miles an hour, for God's sakes, you better be careful out there. Because if that's the damage from 43 miles an hour, that is frightening to think that can happen to you.
And the damage to Joe Hennessy was much more profound. He was completely obliterated and was killed instantly.
Yep. So here's the thing.
So the reason I'm here, since my daughter Sheena was killed by a drunk driver on her 25th birthday in March 2006, I've been keeping my eye on these kinds of cases, and I've learned the ways that Lehigh County DA Jim Martin fixes these cases. I've learned 5, 6, 7 different ways.
Wait. You mean, what do you mean? You're so
fixes the cases. And
that's a pretty big allegation.
Well, if they're not fixed, then he certainly leaves himself wide open to that allegation by the things he does and doesn't do, like not collecting the black box data from Amber Washko's car.
Could it be, though, that, again...
it's either corruption or incompetence.
Could it be that he's overwhelmed?
He's got time for all kinds of other stuff, chasing Glenn Eckhart, chasing Macungie Mayor Rick Hoffman, appealing massage parlor sex cases to the Supreme Court, and they kicked it out. They wouldn't even listen to it. Jim's got time for lots of other things.
Yeah, here's the thing. Bill is concerned, and this public service to you is, and I think that a lot of people don't understand this. It's like, I've used this analogy when I saw a business person 3 times in Easton get flooded, and those 3 floods they had in Easton back in 5, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, whatever it was. There were 3 floods in the 100-year plain, and it's 3. That's like unheard of. And I used whatever I could, my resources, to connect him to FEMA. I expected to get a thank you. Instead, he was exasperated. He goes, this FEMA stuff is nonsense. And he goes,
who's this?
This is a friend of mine. I don't want to say his name.
Okay.
And he had a business down there, and FEMA was rushed to him. And he said, that's such a bunch of bullcrap. When they say FEMA is rushing in aid, it's not true. And then I started talking to other businesses down there, and they said it's absolutely not true. It's just such a bureaucratic nightmare, and you have to. It's almost like they think you're cheating them. Now, they don't worry about other people cheating them, like we talked about the $100 billion last week that went out in incorrect payments to people that are on disability that shouldn't be, etc. My point is, when you hear these stories, what you hear is not always true.
Ooh.
And what I'm saying now, that brings me back to Bill. When you are involved and your family's involved in a case, you think the government is on your side when they're representing you. They're against you. Know, somebody's been charged with murder,
and you think the media is giving you the whole story. And in the Lehigh Valley, with the Morning Call, 69 News, and the Express Times, you're not getting the whole story. I mean, there's some proactive truth concealing going on that I'll talk about today.
Well, and it kind of comes back to what we were just talking about with the kids piece. Bill's a liberal. And I'm obviously conservative.
There goes my audience.
No, but the bottom line is he has something that I feel is valid that he's trying to connect you to and help you understand that
Bobby
if you're
and I
involved,
have a lot of common ground, folks.
We do. And I hear Glenn talking about that all the time now, but quite honestly, it was an attack I took with Michael Cutler and you about a year ago. Well, starting this year, Michael Cutler over a year ago. And I don't care that the Democrats are saying something that's really valid that people need to be aware of. So my point is, if you have, whether it's whether it's a murder because somebody was stabbed or a murder because somebody was killed by a drunk driver, you think the government is going to now arrest those people and be on your side. And you're in for a rude awakening.
Especially if you're not in the club. Did you see yesterday's Morning Call?
No, I don't read the paper.
Allentown developers cultivating political influence. It was an article on Center City Investment Corps co-owners Joe Topper and J.B. Riley. They have, quote, launched a political action committee aimed at channeling their investment in Allentown's rebirth into a campaign fundraising apparatus designed to defend those interests downtown in the halls of local and state government. And since October, they have given out $47,000 in campaign contributions to, Mayor Pulowski, legislators including Senator Pat Brown, State Reps Justin Simmons, Ryan McKenzie, Mike Schlossberg, and this name really jumped out at me, Lehigh County District Attorney Jim Martin.
Why would they give money to Jim Martin?
Well, that's a good question.
But also, here's what they don't like, folks. I want you to hear this. Bill and I allegedly diametrically oppose politically. But I'm on his side in this. And guess what? They are standing there shocked that I would have someone like him on the show. And yet, Michael Schlossberg, liberal, and Justin Simmons and McKenzie in the same breath. So it's okay for them to be aligned. But
Schlossberg, by the way, has never faced an opponent in the primary or a general election.
Which is a sad statement about the Democrat Party not putting anybody else up and the Republicans for giving up on Center City.
And speaking of the Democrats not putting anybody up, are they going to put up a candidate for Lehigh County District Attorney this year, especially with Walter Felton, the former cop, now heading the Lehigh County Democratic Party?
Walt, I think, lives in the west end of Allentown. I think I know Walt.
Yeah. Nice guy. 8 feet tall.
Yeah, that's. Mm-hmm. I do know him. Yeah, I do know Walt. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I actually. I'll tell you a story about him with sheriff someday when he was running for sheriff, I think. All right, so the point is, the bill is here to give us the latest on this case, but the real overall umbrella, folks, is that we're all learning is the government is not on your side. They're on their side. They're on
the side of the favorites, and those who contribute are the favorites.
I'm trying to give a voice to Bill because I think he has a story to tell. And the story to tell is that you, as a person listening, may someday be in the same situation or a similar situation, and you are going to have to be in charge of your own advocacy, because what you think the government's going to do and what they do have been, for many people, two entirely different things. As Bill found out when his daughter was killed by a drunk driver, she got in the car with a drunk driver. I understand that. And people try to say, well, that it's her fault. She was screaming for the last minute of her life to stop the car. I want to get out. So she made a mistake, and she paid for it with her life. And to say, well, she did it is like saying, well, so a woman wore a revealing skirt, so she should be raped. It's insane, the argument that I hear. But Bill lost his daughter and then found out the hard way that he was going to have to battle for justice for her. And now he's seeing it happen with the Hennessy case and other cases. So you have...
Over the last, since Sheena was killed, I've learned it's a growing number of ways now that D.A. Jim Martin fixes DUI homicide cases.
Now, those are your... I want to be clear. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, well, if they're not fixes, as I said, he certainly leaves himself wide open to...
Now, what was going to... You said you were going to give us something that was going to make our hair stand up. So,
well, one of the ways that Jim can make something go away, and we've been talking about, is not collecting pivotal evidence, the black box data from Washko's car. Another way that he can fix it is to conceal damaging evidence.
Show me where he did that.
Well, in my daughter's case, the Allentown policeman who investigated the crash, who's no longer with the force, sat down with myself and Sheena's mom shortly after he finished the crash reconstruction. And he said, I'm probably going to get in big trouble for telling you this, but you need to know. He actually took us to the garage where the Robert LeBar's wrecked car was, and he hunkered down in the dirt and gave us a reenactment of how that crash happened. And he told us that he was estimating the impact against the tree at a minimum speed of 85 miles per hour.
On Broadway in Allentown, folks, right, by the Rose Garden.
The significance of that speed is that it speaks directly to malice. And Jim Martin himself was on CBS Philly. He's quoted, that it's on YouTube, saying that Sheena was cautioning Robert LeBar to slow down. As you mentioned, she was screaming at the top of her lungs for the last 30 seconds of her life. Those pleas to slow down were ignored. That's malice. 85 miles an hour, crash speed. Anyway.
And so what, did he hide that evidence?
No. The police told me that evidence. But when I had a meeting with Jim Martin on August 15th, 2006, asking him why he wasn't charging third-degree murder because of that malice, I said, officer, name withheld, told me the crash speed. And Martin turned cherry red. The veins in his nose popped out, and he bellowed at me, I'll come after you. I'll come after you in the media. He did not want that out. So he didn't want me to know that information, but I knew it.
Okay, so what else?
So concealing damaging evidence is another way that he fixes it. Another way...
Well, saying fixing is saying it's willful. Now, that last one could sound willful, but go ahead.
Well, I'll let the listeners draw their own conclusion. As I said, I see it as case fixing. If it's not case fixing, he certainly leaves himself wide open to that by the stuff he does and doesn't do. Not collecting evidence, concealing evidence.
Okay, what's the next one?
Lying to the grieving family that Lehigh Valley Hospital screwed up the paperwork on the chain of custody having to do with the blood evidence. And also lying to judges that we have a plea deal that both sides are on board with.
Well, give me when he did that.
Less than 3 months after Sheena's crash death in March 06, I saw in the paper, June 4th, 2006, Zachary R. Money, 17, of Allentown, killed by a drunk driver. He was a passenger like Sheena was. Sheena was a front seat passenger. Zach Money was in the back seat. Chris Squires, 20, was the driver. He was going north on Route 29, a couple of blocks north of Beck Road, crashed at 2:49 a.m. A crash reconstructionist estimated Squires was driving 72 miles an hour. Police reported the car traveled 88 feet up an embankment, went airborne for 68 feet. When the car hit the ground, it overturned at least twice before hitting a billboard. The drunk driver, Chris Squires, and his passenger Zach Money, were both ejected from the vehicle. The billboard collapsed on top of the car. There was another passenger, Kyle Gawker, who had graduated with Zach Money 2 days earlier from Central Catholic. They were taken to Lehigh Valley Hospital.
Okay, this is going fast, so
Yeah.
Go ahead. Give me so where does this get to the
I don't know if we'll have time to cover this today, but let me get in as much as I can. The driver, Squires, was injured too, and at Lehigh Valley Hospital they drew his blood. It was .07. Now he's 20. Remember, under state law, anyone under 21 with a BAC of 02 or higher can be charged with drunken driving. In the newspaper, Lehigh County District Attorney Jim Martin was quoted as saying, quote, "It would be days and probably weeks before a decision is made on whether charges will be filed." Well, 2 months later, he finally got around to charging Chris Squires, who was immediately released on bail. There were 14 charges in all, like there are in cases like this, anything from reckless driving to careless driving to, disregarding traffic lane, including the charge of homicide by vehicle while driving under the influence. And that's the big one. That carries a mandatory minimum 3 years in state prison, if it's still on the table at sentencing time. So there was a trial set for September 2007. A jury was chosen on September 24th. That night, Chris Squires pled guilty. And the Morning Call article quoted Judge Steinberg as banging his gavel and saying, and remember this, Squires could get a 5 to 10 year sentence if prison terms for some of the charges run consecutively. The paper also said that the prosecution dropped a charge of homicide by vehicle while under the influence, the big one, which carries a mandatory sentence of 3 to 6 in state prison. And the paper went on to say that the Money family, the victim's family, had agreed earlier this year to prosecutors dropping the charge of homicide by vehicle while driving drunk. And the article was written by Debbie Garlicki, who 2 years later would become Jim Martin's executive aide. She still holds that position. Anyway, I was scratching my head thinking, boy, I was really thankful that the charge of vehicular homicide while DUI stayed on the table. And the only reason it did was because I was banging my gavel for third-degree murder.
On this case, it did not involve you.
Right.
Because you felt it did involve you ultimately.
This case, well,
it was your daughter. You're saying this happened time and time again.
Yeah,
so it's,
yeah. But I'm wondering why. I wonder why the family would agree with prosecutors earlier in the year to drop that major charge.
So you called them?
No, the article was online, and there's a forum there that people can put comments up. Okay, and as I'm scrolling down, and incredibly, this is still on the internet. And here's a hard copy for you.
Okay.
If you scroll down, comment number 22 is from Chris Money, Zach Money's dad, it looks like. Okay? And here's what he said. The homicide while DUI was dropped, in quotes, because the hospital lost or never had the proper paperwork to maintain a chain of custody on the driver's blood. Once that charge was gone, there was no plea bargain. Squire simply pled guilty to the balance of the charges. Get this part. I told the reporter that yesterday when we spoke, but she omitted it from the article. I obviously wish the whole truth had been printed. Thanks, LVHC.
Okay.
So
the charges were...
I thought, did Lehigh Valley Hospital really screw up the blood evidence? I mean, that's where Sheena went after her crash, and she got wonderful attention and care. She was on life support, but I couldn't imagine Lehigh Valley Hospital screwing up the paperwork on the blood evidence. So I contacted Chris Money to see if, in fact, that was him who put that comment up there, and it was. And he told me that the night before the trial was supposed to start, he got a call from Chief Deputy DA Renee Smith, who told him that, bad news, Judge Steinberg toss the blood evidence because Lehigh Valley Hospital screwed up the paperwork on the chain of custody on the blood evidence. And without the blood evidence, we have to drop most of the charges.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Chris Money, Zach Money's dad, the victim's dad, also told me that he had a May 2007 meeting with the DA's office. And, the Squires family and the Money family, they knew each other, I mean, Chris Squires and Zach Money were friends. They wanted justice, but they weren't out for blood. So they had agreed at this meeting, as the newspaper reported, to drop that major charge. However, timing's everything. After they got that agreement, Renee Smith told the Money family, oh, by the way, Chris Squires was arrested in Northampton County for a second DUI after he killed your son, Zach. Well, Chris Money kind of went berserk and did a complete 180 and took back his let's drop that charge.
So it's kind of like when the politicians vote one way when something's in committee and another way when it's out, so they can say they had it both ways. And so,
well, it's interesting that
the Morning Call admits that the family asked the charges to be reinstated.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, it's interesting that the Morning Call had obviously selective insider information that came through reporter Debbie Garlicki. I mean, she knew that the family had agreed to drop the major charge. Okay. Mm-hmm. But she didn't realize that they changed their mind on that. And she also had no knowledge, but I mean, it didn't make the paper, of Lehigh Valley Hospital screwing up the paperwork.
So did Lehigh Valley Hospital screw up the paperwork?
No.
All right, I got 7 minutes for you.
Okay. I called Lehigh Valley Hospital. I spoke with Brian Downs. And because of HIPAA confidentiality requirements, he said he couldn't really tell me anything. But he understood my concern, and he said, have Chris Money call the hospital. Chris did. And the Lehigh Valley Hospital spokesperson told Chris Money there was, quote, nothing inadmissible about the Squires' blood evidence and paperwork the hospital had turned over to DA Jim Martin's office.
So now, what was your initial allegation before you started on this one? You said six ways he fixes cases. One is not collecting evidence. Right? One is not collecting evidence. One is withholding evidence from the family.
Right.
And now?
Privately telling the grieving family that Lehigh Valley Hospital screwed up the paperwork on the blood evidence. Privately, because that never made the paper, even though the reporter was told about it. Okay? Now, that same night, they went to Judge Steinberg and said, we have a plea deal that both sides are on board with. And the reason I know that is, at the time, this hit, the local internet community. And one of the bloggers called Judge Steinberg and asked him about this. And he said, I know nothing about Lehigh Valley Hospital screwing up paperwork. This was presented to me as a plea deal that both sides are on board with. So Renee Smith told two different lies the night before trial. She told Chris Money that Lehigh Valley Hospital screwed up, and she told Judge Steinberg that she had a plea deal that both sides were on board with.
So the next way, or the third way, is lying. 6 ways that you're saying that Jim Martin. You're saying that no. I'm asking you to repeat the 3 allegations we've gone over so far, and that Jim Martin does to fix. You say to fix cases.
Okay.
One is
collecting evidence.
Not collecting evidence.
Concealing evidence.
And now this last one, would you describe under what? Lying?
Blaming Lehigh Valley Hospital.
Okay. And
then lying to a judge.
Okay. And now what are some other ways?
Well, this one...
I know that was rather lengthy, but in detail. Mm-hmm. But you have all the... he's given me paperwork to back up these assertions. But again, go ahead.
On that same...
Now it sounds like, again, I want to bring this back to the point of the lesson of this is...
If it happens to you, here's what to look for. Here's what to do.
Not only if it happens to you, you better not think it's not going to happen to you.
Or someone you know.
Because this isn't just this county. Now, you feel like John Morganelli on DUI cases does a better job, way better job, you feel, you've said this, than Jim Martin.
Yeah, Morganelli routinely charges drunk drivers who kill people within 5 to 6 business days. It's not unusual for Jim Martin in Lehigh County to take upwards of a year or longer to file charges.
But since you've been on, I've heard from other families, not necessarily DUI cases, and not just Lehigh County, where they've gone through the same deal. And it's something we don't talk about. We're always screaming about our legislators. We're always screaming about the president, the governor, school boards. But our court system is not what it should be, and not what the innocent should are paying. In my belief, paying for. It's not what I don't feel like people who are innocent or the victims should have to work so hard on their own behalf when you're expecting the government to be doing that. And I've heard from many people, again, not just Lehigh County, that this is common. That Gunther, what Bill Villa goes through, that's nothing. You should hear what we went through. I've heard that.
I went over this with Morning Call investigations editor Tim Dara. I had some lengthy phone conversations with him on this case, and he said that I was raising excellent questions that deserve to be answered. And he referred me to
this is on the Money case.
This is on the Zach Money case, yeah. He referred me to the Morning Call editorial board's welcome mat meeting. For years and years, when they gave their annual State of the Paper address, they would mention that they have a welcome mat policy open to anyone who wants to be heard. So I wanted to be heard on this case and on Sheena's case, and I petitioned then Vice President Glenn Cransley for a welcome mat meeting, and he kept ignoring me, refusing me. Eventually, I got some local politicos behind me, including Percy Doherty, who at the time was chairman of the Lehigh County Commissioners, to contact Cransley and offered to act as a mediator at the meeting. Long story short, I sent Glenn Cransley 229 polite email requests for a welcome mat meeting.
I'm sure they would consider them not polite, and I'm sure they'd say they were harassing.
They probably would, but they were polite. They were all denied.
All right. So that's 3. We're going to have to get to the other 3 the next time you're on.
And the hair standing up in your back of your neck part is next. But,
go ahead, do that. You got 2 minutes. Just do it briefly, and we'll get to it in the next show.
Okay.
The reason I'm doing this, folks, is I have another guest coming up to talk about how the government is spying on you in more digital ways than you realize, and it's disturbing. When I read this guy's piece, and I thought I got to get him on. So anyway, and he's been on Fox. So that gentleman's name is Eric Schiffer. So he's on the way. He's called the Digital Libertarian. Anyway, go ahead.
Chris Money, the victim's father, he was in sales, and right around this time, some Morning Call ad salespeople who had worked with Chris at another company called Chris and told him they were doing really well in ad sales at the Morning Call, and said there was an open position and that Chris should apply for it. And guess what? He got the job. And shortly after he started at the Morning Call, he was called into the office of one of the bigwigs. He wouldn't tell me who it was specifically. But he was asked, would you like us to speak with the DA's office about, the confusion surrounding the outcome on your son's case? Did Lehigh Valley Hospital screw up the paperwork? Was there a plea deal both sides were on board with? And he said, yeah. So they sent Matt Birkbeck, who's no longer with the Call, over to speak with the DA's office, and he came back basically and said that Renee Smith was on record as saying Mr. Money had misunderstood what she told him in that phone call the night before trial, and that if he wanted to get an attorney and fight it, it would be her word against his. But the Morning Call reached out, hired Chris Money, sent Matt Birkbeck over there to come back and say, your word against theirs. Hired him as an ad salesman.
Oh, wow.
Recruited him. And shortly after that, he left.